All right, I would like to show on your calculator how we would find normal probabilities using the distributions menu. We've been doing this in a table. Now, in my class, I still do not allow you to use the mean and the standard deviation of your distribution. I need you to standardize still and then find standard normal distributions. The thing that you want to realize is that we are looking at a number line, and in order to use the normal distribution on your calculator, you need to be thinking of the area that you're accumulating in terms of a number line and interval notation. Interval notation, remember, was the type of notation where you used a parenthesis that started with your left endpoint and then you went up to your right endpoint. Now when we're talking about going off to negative infinity, I'm going to use a negative e to the 10th power, and then I'm going to use a positive e to the 10 when I'm going off to the positive infinity. So let me just show you how to get those two values. So if I want to get the exponential, that's right here on my calculator, that second function of the comma key. So if I want to do negative infinity, I'm going to go down here and I'm going to grab my negative, and then I'm going to do second function, and then I'm going to go grab the comma, and you see right up there now I have negative e, and then I'm going to put in to the 10th power. So that's really negative 1 times 10 to the 10th, which is a really tiny number. And that's how I'm going to represent negative infinity. Now if I wanted to represent positive infinity, I would just not be using the negative there. I just do the e to the 10th. And you see if I hit enter, then I see 1 e to the 10th. So it really doesn't matter if I use the 1 or not. I don't have to use that extra step. So the function that I'm going to be using is called the density function. It's the cumulative density function. So that's the normal CDF. So that first value that we were looking at in our last example, the one where I said I wanted to be between 1% and 2%, in order to do that on my calculator, the first thing I would want to do is I would want to say that I would be between a negative 1.5 and a 2.25, because remember I did tell you that I want you to standardize them first no matter what. And then 0 mean and a 1 standard deviation, and then I'm off and running. And then this is what you would see if you had a calculator without the newest operating system. You would have seen that when you hit the normal CDF on the distributions menu, that it would have come up and it would have been waiting right at this point here for you to enter a negative 1.5 and then a comma. And remember, the comma key is right here. Right, it's right above the 7 key. That's where you'll find a comma, and then you would have had to enter in 2.25, and then you could have done comma 0, comma 1, but you do not have to use the 0 and 1. The calculator will assume 0 and 1 whether you enter it or not, and then you hit enter, and you see that the probability is 0.9209. Now that should be the same probability that we came across when we did it on our calculator, but I don't have that value right in front of me, so or without the calculator, I'm sorry, I don't remember if that was what we actually got or not. So now the next value that we calculated on our last example was the probability of being greater than 2%. So when we were going greater than 2%, you're starting at a value and you're going off to infinity. So for that, I'm going to do second function, and I'm going to do my distributions. I'm going to go to my normal CDF, and this time I'm going to start at the 2.25. So that's my left endpoint, and my right endpoint is positive infinity. So I'm going to do second function, and then my comma key to get to the e, and then I'm going to do 10, because that's a really big number, and then a 0, and then a 1, and then I'm going to paste it, and there I go. And remember again, if you have the old operating system, once you hit the normal CDF, you're going to be at this point here. You put in 2.25, you do comma, and then you do e to the 10, and then you just enter, because you don't need to put in the 0, 1. And then that's the probability that we get there. And that was exactly what we got with our calculator. Now remember that, or excuse me, with our table, remember 1, 2, 3, 4 decimals is all you're doing. You're going to round it right there so that you get the exact same probability that you get on your table. I don't want any different probabilities than what you would get out of a table. And that's how you use the distribution. Now, one that I think we probably should look at just for the sake of looking at it, let's look at a negative one. So let's say we wanted the probability of being less than, let's do less than the 1%. So instead of greater than 2%, let's do less than 1%. So if I were going to do less than 1%, the 1% is the highest point. So I'm going to do the distributions menu, the CDF, and so now I'm coming from negative infinity, so I'm going to do the negative sign, right down there is negative sign, and then second function, and then the comma key, and then I'm going to do 10, because that's negative 1 times e to the 10th. And then my upper bound this time is a negative 2.12. And so now I've gone from negative infinity up to that bound, still a standard normal, enter it in, and that would be the, that would be the probability that I have. Still doing 1, 2, 3, and 4 places. And so that would be what I would round it off and give that probability as. And that was exactly what we found in our table when we looked up the probability of being less than negative 2.12. So that's how to use our calculator.